Hi everyone, and welcome to week 4 of the PhDigital Bootcamp. We are going to be discussing the topic of web development this week. I hope you're doing well in the modules so far. I've been really enjoying the discussions that we've been having. But this week is going to be a little different. It's going to be more hands-on and getting you some experience with skills that you can bring into your classroom. There is a video each on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And I know some of you have experience in some of these areas, so you can jump in where you feel you need to jump in. If you feel like you need to get started at the beginning, feel free to do that. If you already know HTML and CSS pretty well, then go ahead and move on to the JavaScript area. You'll have a chance to build out an HTML page for the exercise using a code sample that I provide to you. And so that will help you understand some of the techniques that I am talking about in the video. And then in the workshop, we will be primarily focused on applying the interactive techniques of JavaScript. So we'll want to build on the knowledge of HTML and CSS. This week I also have an optional video on mobile app development. So if you have some extra time, or if this is something that interests you, if you already have some experience with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, or other types of programming, you might want to check out this video if you want to learn more about making mobile apps. It's a fairly different environment, and it's something that I've just delved into myself over this past year. So keep up the good work. I know this is time consuming, but we want to make sure we maximize our time together in May by dealing with all the basics now and kind of setting a baseline for all the participants. And again, I appreciate the commitment that you have made in doing this workshop so that you can share these concepts with your students. So let's get started with web development. When you talk about web development, you could be talking about a range of different things. And what it really represents is a number of different technologies that all work together to be able to display items in a browser. So I'm going to try to cover on a very broad level, and there's a lot in here. So depending on how far along you are, maybe some of you already have experience with HTML and CSS, just want the JavaScript area. This may be new to some of you. There may be some additional concepts or ways of approaching it that might be helpful to you. But you need to be able to understand HTML, and that's the sort of basic language of the web that the browsers interpret to be able to display web pages. CSS, or cascading style sheets, and that is what applies the design elements to the web. And then JavaScript, and that actually provides the programming capabilities to allow websites to be more interactive. It's the most commonly used, what we call client-side language, to add interactivity to websites. In this day and age, it's very important to be responsive in your design techniques so that your website can display properly across a number of devices. And that leads to mobile development, and many people actually make apps in addition to their website or instead of a website, and some things really lend more toward an app. Some types of projects like, say, Shazam or Foursquare or Facebook, I mean, they work really well on an app because they want to maximize the features of the device. So we won't be getting too much into mobile development, but I'm going to create a video that has some of the concepts that I've been working with that you can take a look at if you're interested in that. And if there's anybody who's interested in that when they're in San Marcos, maybe we can do a breakout session on mobile app development. But continuing with web development concepts, there are frameworks that actually help make the process of web development a little bit more rapid. And one of the main frameworks is Bootstrap. And you probably have seen Bootstrap maybe without even knowing it. And some of the giveaway features of a Bootstrap site like this one here that is a cleaning site, there's usually a dominant image across the top or sometimes a carousel of images. The navigation goes across the top, and then you have a lot of little icons, and columns are the most prevalent feature of Bootstrap. So this is able to separate this little section here, this row, into a series of columns very easily. So again, if you see sites, there's no coincidence that there's a lot of sites that look like this these days with these rows that have different columns in them, because Bootstrap sort of created that metaphor for design. I'm assuming that this is going to change at some point, that people are going to get tired of looking at these Bootstrap sites, but they really pioneered this idea of very visual and very clean layouts for sites. And then there's content management systems, one of which is WordPress. And some of you probably work with WordPress. There's WordPress.com, which allows you to host a site on their server, sort of like Blogger or something like that. And you get to use the basic WordPress interface on a WordPress.com site. but you also can download the WordPress system onto your own host and host your own files there and your own content. It's an open source system, and about 25% of all websites are developed in WordPress. They're hosted, or their back end is provided by WordPress, and that just provides the database that holds all your content and allows you to organize your content. And quite often there are themes created in WordPress that are based in Bootstrap. So all this stuff kind of flows together. Before we go too much further into coding, though, we want to talk for a minute about why even learn how to code. Why is this relevant to communicators? And there's several reasons. One is the platforms that we're using now to distribute content management systems like we just talked about, are the modes of operation in many content organizations. And so to be able to work within a content management system and potentially have to go into the code and tweak something, not be afraid, and be able to solve those kinds of problems, I think will be a very important skill. I use many content management systems, and barely a day goes by that I'm not tweaking something in the code as user-friendly as they are supposed to be. As communicators, we often want to use data, so we might want to scrape data from a website. So to be able to know how to code so we can pull data from a website and be able to use that data in some sort of a presentation, I think is going to be extremely valuable. And sometimes that data is actually in what's called an application programming interface. It's provided by the company, like Facebook or Twitter. There are many, Yelp. There are many application programming interfaces, Spotify, and perhaps we want to pull data from something like that. So to be able to know how to code, to be able to work with an API and be able to take it from the code that looks like this to a spreadsheet that actually allows you to pull the data that you want, to finally making sense of it, being able to display it in some sort of a chart, or being able to take a look at the language and the topics that are being discussed at an event like this, makes that much more meaningful to the user. Another reason to be able to learn how to code is it is really the basis for making things interactive, and sometimes you want to make things like an interactive chart or a graph for a site, and there are many ways that coding can help in that endeavor. And then finally, no matter who you are, no matter how interested you are in coding, if you're going to work in any sort of a communications environment, it is likely you're going to be on a collaborative team at some point where you're working on an interactive project. And so just to be able to communicate with developers, explain to them your needs, or to be able to be a valuable member of a team that's working on an interactive project, it really behooves you to have at least some basic understanding of code and logic and the problem solving associated with coding. And so this is a ProPublica project, Dollars for Docs, where they found data about physicians and the kinds of financial funding that they're getting from pharmaceutical companies. This was a huge project. I know one person did not work on this project. There was a lot of collaboration between content people as well as development people in being able to make this very helpful application that lets users look up their own doctors in their own states and see how prevalent this trend is.